So I think it's a really good moment. And again, it's yet another indication to me that I think broadly speaking, the markets are now starting to stabilize. All the irrational behavior is starting to exit the system. The party is in the last few hours. Volume's going down, the alcohol's been taken away, people are hanging around with a little bit, lights are coming on, they're like, oh, I've been here a little too long. And I think that that's a very healthy process for an economy. And I think that that's what's happening right now. It's another data point that, again, I said it last week, I'll go out on a limb and predict my equivalent November fall predictions. Last fall, it was that the markets were going to poop the bed. My prediction now is that I think the markets are bottoming and consolidating.
Yep, 100%.
And this is the time, I think, to start nibbling and start getting ready to really rip the money in. And I think there's enough signals every day that kind of like tell me at least that on the margin, it's time, because I think the markets do a reasonably good job of digesting news and then pricing the forward reality, right? Like today's price is really everything we already know. And so the real guess is what's about to happen in the future. And from my perspective, I'm actually starting to get a little constructive here. I think that when companies like Facebook really do this, and like if you think about it one way, the financial markets have always had this thing that we have called a Fed put. What does that mean? A put is essentially the right to sell something. And what market participants have always known for the last decade is that if things got very hairy, if there was uncertainty in the market, the Federal Reserve would, and they have, consistently stepped in to create a buyer of last resort. And so it always eliminated that last part of true, supply-demand balance, because they would just come and say, don't worry, definitely is the end of an era. I think it is sort of like the end of this phase of big tech where you had this, unfettered growth, where these business models were largely unassailable, and they, were really just fighting to grow into their valuation and just generate more revenue to justify where they traded at. And now it's this next phase where they have to operate more like a cash cow business. And so, it's an acknowledgement that the growth is tapering. It's an acknowledgement that they're going to trade on a pretty tight band in terms of multiple, which means that they have to manage expenses much more tightly, which means that they can't have a really broad-based surface area in which to operate an experiment. You have to keep the experiments small. You have to manage your expenses. You can't have employees basically, run over the place. Management has to have a firm hand in dictating strategy and what people work on. So I think all of that signals that Jason, I don't think this is the end. I actually think it's the beginning, because these companies, Apple, Facebook, Google, maybe a little bit Microsoft, are the most sensitive to valuation because they are the most widely held, right? These are the equivalent of US Treasuries in the equity markets, the safest, most predictable safe haven in times of stress. If you want to own big, chunky cash flow generating businesses that, are relatively unassailable, you couldn't pick 4 better businesses than those. And so the fact that they see enough in the horizon to say that we need to batten down the hatches should be a warning to everybody else. In many ways in tech, what the big tech companies were that. You could never really find what the true market clearing price for an engineer was, or what the true amount of expenses you should spend on office space or, free services. Because you always had these companies, which was an escalating arms race. If one company had a massage, the next company had gyms and massage and physical therapists, and the other company would have buses to take you to the gyms and massage and therapists, and the next company would have protein shakes that were freshly made. And it just kept escalating and escalating because the costs didn't matter. And they wanted, if nothing else, to get that marginal engineer or product manager or business person to work at their company, which eliminated the risk that they would actually start something to disrupt them. So when you take this big tech put out of the market, you will get true price discovery, and you will find out what the real price should be for this kind of an engineer, that kind of a product manager. You'll find out what are the real expenses you need to bear in order to build a real lasting business. And you'll be able to sort through all of that stuff out. So I think it's a really good moment And again, it's yet another indication to me that I think, broadly speaking, the markets are now starting to stabilize. All the irrational behavior is starting to exit the system. The party is in the last few hours. Volume's going down, the alcohol's been taken away, people are hanging around with a little bit, lights are coming on, they're like, oh, I've been here a little too long. And I think that that's a very healthy process for an economy. And I think that that's what's happening right now. So I'm constructive, I'm a little bullish, I'll go out on a limb. I think, we could be 3 to 5% from the lows, but we're more near the lows than the highs. We will also relive what we have empirically known to be true, and it's been pretty well proven. The investments that one makes in this period will probably be the best for many, many years to come because they'll have the most asymmetric upside. And that was true in 2008 and 9 and 10. It was true in 2002, 3 and 4. You're talking incredible companies just in those two periods. Think about this: Atlassian, Tesla,
Uber, Google,
Airbnb, Uber, Instagram, WhatsApp. Incredible businesses that have created tremendous value. And so there are businesses that have been invested in for the first time in 2022 and will be invested in for the first time in 2023 and 24, which will be the leading winners of this next phase and this next leg up. And so the real opportunity is to find out who those companies are and get behind them, I think. Unfortunately, Western governments are working, but I think there's a silver lining. Like, she basically came in a day after she got elected and said, okay, guess what, guys? At the same time, I'm going to massively cut taxes and I'm going to give you fiscal stimulus. I'm going to cap your energy bills and I'm going to have these huge transfer payments from the government into the hands of British citizens. I'm not going to comment on whether that's right or wrong. But the financial markets, to your point, David, absolutely hated it. And within a few days, you basically saw the pound get crushed. But then what did you see? You saw the Bank of England decide that financial stability was more important than financial viability, meaning the things that she wanted to do were not viable. So you could have let the financial markets sort this out, which would have forced the prime minister to basically abandon the policy. But instead, the BOE said, no, we're an unlimited buyer of UK gilts, which is the name of the UK bond. And everything snapped back. We're back to where we were before her speech and before the Chancellor of the Exchequer's speech. And so it's as if nothing happened. And that's what's so insane to me, which is that even though the Bank of England, by the way, in the next week or two are going to raise rates 140 basis points. 140 basis points, almost double what the Fed has done the last 3 times. They're doing both at the same time. They're both raising rates and they're acting as a backstop for bad policy. And this is what's wrong right now in the world. We do not have a real check and balance. So my point to Friedberg is just that I'm like emotionally on your side. But the problem is, if these folks keep getting bailed out, David, they're just going to keep doing this stuff and there's no end in sight.